Well, hello everyone out there. It's Ranger Chad here again. And today it's time for another one of our Virtual Tarmac Talks. Last time we talked a little bit about the Tuskegee Airmen, really with that first set of training, that civilian pilot training program that took place with the Tuskegee Institute. Today, we're going to continue the story of their training. We're going to talk about their military training that took place out here at Moton Field, the same spot where the Tuskegee Airmen National Historic Site is located. So we're going to go ahead and get started, and we hope that you enjoy. So as the U.S. prepared for war, the Selective Service Act went into effect. Now, the Selective Service Act specifically made it so that every race was going to be drafted into a war. And African Americans had a bit of a problem with this. They saw the inequality and the hypocrisy that was present when they were being forced to fight for a country that treated them less than whole citizens. So people like the NAACP and Yancey Williams actually fought for equality for opportunities in the U.S. military. One of those opportunities was to become pilots in the U.S. Army Air Corps. Now, around the same time, President Franklin Roosevelt was looking to be reelected. And just like many politicians nowadays, on the campaign trail, he made some campaign promises. One of those promises, knowing that he'd need the African-American vote, was that he would allow for an African-American pilot training program to take place. When FDR wins re-election, he's actually holds true to that campaign promise and does institute an African-American military pilot training program. Now, what's not said during those campaign promises is that it's going to be a single training squadron, and it's also going to be rigidly segregated. And here at Moton Field is where all of that began. In 1941, the Tuskegee Airmen program officially started. Now, Tuskegee, as we spoke about last time, was chosen for three main reasons: the good flying weather, the high scores on the civilian pilot training program tests, and the willingness of Tuskegee Institute to work with the U.S. government. Now, the U.S. government and the Army Air Corps realized that Kennedy Field, where the civilian pilot training program had been taking place, was not going to be satisfactory for a military training program. So Moton Field was constructed. Now, at the same time, the first class of cadets for the Tuskegee Airmen program started going through. In the end, 5 of these cadets would graduate, with one of them being none other than Benjamin O. Davis Jr. And he actually is going to become the commander of the Tuskegee Airmen as we get deeper into our story. In 1942, construction began on Hangar 1 here at Moton Field. However, the contracting company, McKissick & McKissick, that was contracted to build the structure, ran into troubles as they were building. The support from Tuskegee was so great that they actually had students from the bricklaying and brick foundry department walk the 6 miles down here to Moton Field in order to help construct the building. And when the Tuskegee Airmen program started, that support continued. And the Tuskegee Airmen, the cadets, were actually given the nickname by the city of Our Boys, and often referred to as such in many of the newspapers and publications that came out later. In the beginning, all of the cadets for the Tuskegee Airmen program were required to have 2 years of college, but many had 4-year degrees and some even had master's degrees. Many of the cadets also had their civilian license that they had received through the civilian pilot training program. Now, here at Moton Field, it was really used for the first 9 weeks, or what was known as primary flight training. As the Army instructors put it, it was to see if the Tuskegee Airmen could fly the way the Army needed them to fly. So they would come out to this site for about half a day after their ground school courses at Tuskegee Institute, and they would practice things like landings and takeoffs. They would also practice banking turns and some of the very simple flight maneuvers that they would need if they were going to graduate from primary flight training. Initially, the washout rate was very high for primary flight training, with almost 60% of the Tuskegee Airmen cadets not graduating and being forced to move on from fighter pilot training. By the time Moton Field was in full swing, both hangars were completely filled. In fact, we're on to my favorite part of our tarmac talks. We're going to talk about the aircraft used here. Now, in primary flight training, the Tuskegee Airmen really were flying mostly PT-17 Stearman, like the one you'd see here. And the PT-17 had 225 horsepower, and it was nicknamed the Blue Terror by the cadets. The reason for this was the first thing the instructors did was take a new cadet inside and then do as many aerobatics as they could in trying to get the Tuskegee Airmen either sick or a little scared. The control tower that we're in is actually connected to Hangar 2 and had two major purposes. The first was that since the PT-17 trainers didn't have radio communication, the control tower would be used to manage all the traffic out here on the tarmac. And they would actually do this through a signal lamp, with green being the signal to take off or to be able to land, and red being either to continue traffic holding patterns or to stop. Now, the second use for the control tower was actually for cadets and instructors to use this wonderful 360-degree view in order to watch other cadets as they were making maneuvers. They could watch both landings, taking offs, and they could also watch specific aerobatic maneuvers from all directions in order to learn how to improve their own flying capabilities. Now, as you can see, modern-day Moton Field is a little bit different than what it would have looked like back in the 1940s. The modern-day hangars and the modern-day terminals would not have been here. In addition, most of this concrete would not have been here either. But today, the continuation of African Americans learning to fly is still alive and well. That legacy of the Tuskegee Airmen is held on in part by the Red Tail Scholarship Foundation. The Red Tail Scholarship Foundation actually works to get more minorities and African Americans into the pilot seat. And right now, they have over 30 students from Tuskegee University that are getting their civilian pilot's license free of charge here on Moton Field, continuing that long legacy that the Tuskegee Airmen started. The ground that I walk on every day when I come to work is historic ground. This is the location where every one of the 992 Tuskegee Airmen fighter pilots initially learned how to fly the Army way. When you come to visit our site, you will actually be stepping back into a historic period, both filled with sadness and triumph in overcoming adversity. And I'd like to thank you for joining us here on our Virtual Tarmac Talk. Once again, my name is Ranger Chad. It's been a pleasure to have you here at a virtual Tuskegee Airmen National Historic Site. Feel free to leave a comment down below. I'd love to be able to respond to any questions or anything that you really want to ask. And if you have any ideas for future virtual Tarmac Talks, add that as well. We're always looking for new ones to add. If you haven't added us as a friend on Facebook, do that as well so you can get the most up-to-date information about the Tuskegee Airmen National Historic Site. Thank you again for joining us, and I'll look forward to seeing you in the next one.